the decision model. Specifically, I work with, well, let me start, this format drives me nuts. Fun facts on Sapiens Decision. We're a very mature product. We're in production at scale in 3 of the top 5 banks in the US. We deliver a decision manager where we do business logic modeling and management, 2 ways of implementation. One is decision execution, our own engine, and the other is through adapters to Drools, Java, XML, ODM. Capita is our partner in this RPA venture. Their market position is they're the market leader in BPM in the UK, 24% share of a $10 billion market. Derek, take note. This is their credentials. They're managing about 21 million life policies and 550 occupational pension schemes with 4 million members. They deal with many of the big names in the UK. Their RPA journey started in 2011 with Blue Prism implementing at O2, starting at 25,000 transactions a month of a total 1 million transactions. By 2016, they're up to 1.3 million robotic transactions a month out of a total of 1.7, saving from 420 FTE down to 160 FTE. You can see this was a phenomenally successful implementation for them. They're continuing to develop that implementation. They feel very good about this. And based upon this great success, they decided to roll out RPA across their major line of business, which is pension fund administration. Their pilot started in 2011. The full plan details were chosen as their pilot area. They had a multi-month program of analysis, building and testing, and they targeted 10 FTEs. The outcome was very disappointing. The process was significantly more complex than the documentation described or that they expected or that they had experienced before. Many human decisions, so they canceled the project after that failure. They started to rethink. They thought, what do people do? They excel at customer contact. What do robots excel at? Robots really excel at going to fetch data, replacing repetitive processes, light integration access to legacy systems, which for a business process outsourcer is very important. And then finally, what to do about logic. And so they saw decision management as a way for consistent application of business logic that has been externalized, visualized, and tested for accuracy, and most importantly for them, reusable, so that they can use the same logic across multiple clients. So the new solution they came up with was decision-enabled automation, DA they call it, where processes are reframed as decisions. Decisions are separated from the automations, and most important, a single glossary so that they could describe their problem once and use it many different places. So this is what the solution looks like. Some form of form, a decision process, a decision automation engine, and robots. And most importantly of all, to bind them together, a glossary maintaining mappings between all these systems so that we can use these same decisions in multiple different systems. So this implementation has allowed them to remove the knowledge worker from out of the process, separate the knowledge worker, and run the process independently and use the knowledge worker only for those places where it's appropriate for the knowledge worker to be used. So when to use traditional RPA? When data and rules are encoded together in automation and processes are leaned and comprehensively mapped, and there's volume and scale. In other words, automated transactions. If you want to automate process, look at decision-enabled automation, where processes are conditionally complex, reuse possible when multiple business units are making the same sets of decisions. So this is not cognitive yet. That's our next step. A declarative decision model plus RPA or IoT or API-driven data provides a fundament for great customer experience on the front end, cognitive and data-driven decisions. So what we learned from this experience of our first pilot, which completed back in December, was that this is possible. Where we are now is in our first project. Where we intend to go is to roll this out across 28 insurance companies where Capita is the principal business process outsource. Our intention is to be able to reuse the same basic 42 processes that are implemented in insurance management, insurance life cycle, life insurance life cycle, and pension life cycles to automate and reduce significantly, very significantly, the total manpower necessary to operate these solutions. So with that, I have a very brief demo. It's not a true demo. It is actually a video. I have a certain dispensation from the powers that are, and I'm just going to play it. It's pretty boring because all you're going to see is screens popping, but this is a kind of a map of where we are. And again, if you remember the solution, we have an initial e-form entry. These e-forms are actually generated by the decision tool, and then they're prettied up by actual artists. But the glossary generates the data labels and the data types to the e-form. The e-form is a means of initiating the process. You must understand that a BPO typically does not have access to the underlying technology and has to start with what's given. So the technology we're going to be talking to are multiple different systems, in fact 5 or 6 different systems, one of which was the first automation generation, which was a workflow tool, some sort of process tool that was implemented to actually manage the entire life cycle. And that workflow tool is what we're actually going to be addressing, what the robot is going to be addressing, and the underlying screens from the mainframes and the legacy systems that actually ran the different components of this tool. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in the initial data to kick it off. That's going to be sent to decision. Decision runs a set of decisions which determine which systems we're going to, which RPA agents we're going to be calling, what data we're calling for, and by the way, and it's going to first, of course, test the data that has been keyed in for validity, gather the information, gather from that entry what information needs to gather, send off to the agents to go and gather it. The agents are going to return that data. Decision is going to determine the quality of that data for data acceptance. And once having determined that data, is going to determine the actions to be taken based upon the data being returned. Once it's decided what actions are to be taken, we have a validation step, a manual validation step by agent. This has been inserted by Capita for quality purposes. There are thoughts that this actually, once we develop some confidence, can be skipped. And then once the manual validation has been done or additional information put into the tool by the agent, the data is going to be analyzed for acceptability, and then action is going to be initiated amongst the multiple agents. So the actions could be letters being sent, bank transfers being initiated, policies canceled, or whatever the actual action called for in the process. The essential importance of the reusability of the process is that we see all the processes that we're automating follow the same pattern. Go out and get the data I'm looking for, check the data, initiate the action based upon the data I've been returned. That's essentially the process. And so if we can boil every one of those insurance policy actions down to that process, then we can automate it by the reusability of the decisions. So any questions up to that point? Everybody get it? So now you'll watch some screens flashing. As I say, it's pretty boring. But what we're seeing now is the agent entering the data. And once that's done, it says get details. What we're doing is we're going into the workflow tool, which is this underlying workflow tool here. The workflow tool is calling the particular screens. The robot is entering the data being given and returning and getting returned to it the data from the system. We're going through a succession of workflow screens. You see them pop up every now and again. This is Blue Prism, yeah. Actually, in our pilot, we used 4 different vendors for the RPA robots before we determined on vendor. And the point is the solution had to be technology independent. So we had to use any robot, as it were. And so the decision execution environment provides the task broker that actually drives the robot. So we see we're getting towards the end of the data gathering process. And you see decision executing here. What decision is doing is evaluating that and returning to the web form the information that it's got from the underlying policies. This agent is doing some additional work that we were unable to, in the pilot, automate. This is the kind of work that is considered important to have a human manage. This is, for example, recognition of identity. Although that recognition of identity, I believe that will be automated in due course. And once having filled in the form, the agent is going to submit the form, and we're off to the races. What we're going to do now is the robot is going the agents are going to actually execute the instructions. And this may be a payment, this may be a cancellation, this may be a letter sent to the customer. There are relatively few types of actions that we do, and we're trying to standardize those types of actions, because at the end of the day, the value of the added value of this process, the number of FTEs it can remove, is going to be determined by how much work has to be done to implement the solution for a given problem. So we've reached the end of the line, the action has been taken, the return has been done, and that's the video. So any questions? That was real time, yes. Sorry, Denny.
So the orchestration of this series of activities,
yes.
Is that done in the RPA or is that hard-coded?
It's all done by decision, nothing hard-coded. It's pretty much, and I'll show you that, it's pretty much determined by the process flow in decision. So this would be, for those who are familiar with it, a decision model in decision. So decision is both a modeling tool and a management tool, and it manages the full life cycle, including deployment. So there's a life cycle for the, I think this is running on 15 seconds. Oh my God, this is my nightmare, you know, the 15-second nightmare. Who the idiot was who invented that thing? So for those who are familiar, decision is a kind of full life cycle management tool, a comprehensive repository that has both the decision assets, the glossary, and process flows. And this is a classic process flow that you just saw, actually. I wonder if it's going to change after 15 seconds. So I think this is determining the process type, and depending on some process, it is going to do that, my word. Bruce, you and I are going to have a conversation after this.
Just turn it off.
return.
Go to the transitions.
Yeah. All right, well,
Check,
I'll do it from here. So, so what's going to happen here is that we're going to start with this first transaction, which is determined, and I know you can't read it from there, but we're going to be determining what type of policy flow it is. If it's an update, we go to one. Yeah, let me turn it off. I'm sorry, guys.
uncheck that after 15. It's like, oh,
There. Yeah, but it's on every slide. Let me select all the slides. I can apply to all. Got it. Right. So in essence, what we're doing is we're going to determine the type of policy process. If it's death, we're going to just execute that agent. If it's not, we're going to determine the policyholder information, change action required, and these are going to determine the policy change action. These are all exclusive paths, and this is going to drive, so the agents have to run one after the other. They can't run in parallel, and so this is driving, this path will drive this agent, then this agent, then this agent, and will be done. And the agent's going to return to the process the results of that action. And so that's when we return from. So this was actually the process we ran. And then this would be setting up the process codes in the glossary. So the glossary really manages the translations to the process. What this enables us to do is have a standard decision using standard glossary terms for the decision, and then translating it for each different system and for each different agent. Okay, does that help at all, Denny? Any other questions? Yes.
So was decision acting as the workflow engine, or was there?
Well, there's a workflow engine in decision. Yes, yes.
It just sounded a lot like an event condition structure that you have there, because it was based on the different things that are collected.
But remember, these RPA actions are running completely blind. I mean, these RPA actions are simply returning what they find. So what's going to happen is this is going to return to the REST interface that's coming from the decision execution engine what it's gathered. It doesn't know how to do anything other than go and gather that information, return that information. Decisions getting that information and then making determination of what to do from there. It just happens that there's a single RPA and it's returning it, but yeah. Okay, any other questions? Yes?
So do you have multiple instances of this running simultaneously?
Oh yeah. Yeah, so in a large scale implementation there would be, 20 instances, 30 instances, it depends on how they need to scale it out for the level of throughput they need. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
In the sample
Yes.
video, the emulator that was running is embedded, or you integrate with emulators from different vendors?
So Blue Prism integrates either with an emulator or with its own emulator. It's nothing to do with us. From our perspective, from the decisions perspective, the agent to us is just an agent. So our role in that situation will be dependent upon what the agent can provide in terms of either going directly to the emulator or being the emulator itself. And it's running against multiplicity of systems, so there may be different approaches to each system.
I'm just saying to predict David Moss is not here to sort of demo, because in a way we've been talking about Blue Prism as like certainly a key player in this space.
Yeah, well, we work closely with Blue Prism. We work with 3 different we call them widget manufacturers, and we use Blue Prism because it was probably, at the end of the day, we selected them because for this particular project, because they were the most mature product that we worked with. But actually, there were some value and advantages to working with others as well. We wanted to be independent of the agent that we use, because ultimately, we may need to change those out from time to time. And for different clients, we may be using different agents. So because Capita and Sapiens are taking this product to market as a complete solution, not just for Capita's BPO work, but we're going to be marketing this to third-party customers as a solution. So in a way, we'll be in competition with Blue Prism. Okay, good. Thanks very much indeed.
Perfect. All right, let's kick it off. My name is Harald Schubert. I'm the lead architect of the BPM unit at SAP, and yeah, I'm excited to be here today and share with you our latest BPM cloud offering that became generally available end of last month. And I want to start with what Gartner refers to as bimodal IT, right, which is about the practice of companies to operate in 2 modes. Mode 1, which targets areas that are well understood with the purpose to further optimize processes. And Mode 2, which is more exploratory in nature, where you experiment to solve new problems, like how you can better engage with your customers, scenarios involving the Internet of Things, machine learning questions, etc. SAP has always been strong in building standard software for Mode 1, whether it's classic S/4HANA or any of the applications SAP is offering natively in the cloud, like SuccessFactors for HR, Concur for travel management. And for Mode 2, SAP now offers SAP Cloud Platform to develop, run, and operate extensions in the cloud. It's in this context that we've built SAP Cloud Platform Workflow, which is what I want to present to you today. Besides the bare runtime, Workflow comes with tools to model and administer your workflows and an inbox for your users to access their tasks. When building workflows, you can develop your own custom UIs, which are then seamlessly meshed up with the inbox into a coherent UI. Rules will follow later this year. Workflow uses SAP Cloud Platform integration to connect to other services and systems, SAP or non-SAP, on-prem or in the cloud, in all those cases where you need protocols other than REST, so if you need to do any heavy lifting like data transformation, receiver determination, and so forth. Finally, SAP API Business Hub is a central developer portal in the web where SAP publishes its services APIs. From there, you can basically explore the services and test drive the services you're interested in. Now let's look under the cover and let me show you how we built the service. I figured this might be interesting for you. So as this image tells you, we're using open source through and through, right? So workflow engines are no longer by themselves a differentiating factor. And we figured that open source workflow engines have come a long way and are simply good enough for what we need. So we're using, in this case, Activity, running on a Tomcat cluster with Java 8. And so far, we've been really happy with the decision. So when you buy our service, workflow is made available to you by means of a subscription, which grants you access to the service via a dedicated secure endpoint. Internally, we create a database schema for your tenant to ensure data isolation. This is what we call the platform as a service model. We're also working on an OEM-like SaaS scenario where ISVs or partners can use workflow within the SaaS application they are building and offering to their customers. This way, the SaaS customers don't directly use workflow, but they rather interact with workflow via the SaaS application. To this end, we support the notion of a tenant within a tenant, where within the database schema we created for the ISV or partner, tenant columns across all the tables in the schema are used to ensure data isolation between the SaaS customers. All right, with that, let's head over to the Cloud Cockpit and let me walk you through the experience of building a workflow from scratch. All right, so this is like the central entry point into SAP Cloud Platform, whether you're a developer, an administrator, or a support user. From here, you can access all the applications you have developed and deployed in the cloud. You can see the services that are available to you. You can check persistence, details, connectivity. And we'll start with looking at the services. So these are the platform services that are offered by SAP Cloud Platform. They are more technical in nature, obviously, right? So we have categories here for analytics. We have categories for collaboration, like the gamification service we'll be using later, data and storage, DevOps-related stuff, integration, the integration service, the workflow service, which we'll be using. Finally, down here at the bottom, the portal service. So let's go ahead and look into the workflow service. I've already enabled the service for my account, right? So if you start with a fresh account, this will not be the case. Instead, you get an enable button, you hit enable, and then within a matter of seconds, we onboard you. That's the point in time when we create the tenant for you, and then you can already start. So that's the central point where you can access, for example, documentation, right? Developer guides, REST APIs. So here we have some RAML documentation for all our service interfaces that we offer. And we'll start now with building a simple workflow. And the scenario I want to show is based around an HR scenario. So let's assume you have hired a new employee. You do that in SuccessFactors, for example, right? And at the end of the SuccessFactors process, the employee has been hired. And you want to extend this with a buddying process. So when the new employee joins the team, you want to have a teammate who is maybe supporting him a bit, figuring out what the right equipment is for him, and you want to do this with an extension based on Cloud Platform workflow. And that's what we'll do now. I hope you can read this at the bottom. At the bottom here is the property sheet. So we'll just go ahead and give our workflow a name, and this is a little tool here that helps me type so I don't mistype anything. So we give this a name and a subject. The subject is the text that shows up differently for each and every workflow instance. It supports curly brace expressions, so you can access the data in the workflow context. And now let's create a simple one-step workflow to begin with, where we want to assign some equipment by a buddy. And this also gets a subject. Again, parameterizable. We enter some recipients here for the demo. I'm hard coding this, but in a productive scenario, obviously, you would be doing some expressions or something like that. And finally, I need to key in some coordinates on how exactly I want the UI to look like. So this is all based on an HTML5 toolkit that SAP has in its portfolio, SAP UI5, which we'll be using. And with that, we should be good to go. So we deploy this thing. And now we should have a workflow deployed. And what we now need is the portal. Already enabled that. So as you might have seen on the diagrams, that's the point in which we basically aggregate all the UIs. And this is like an administrator UI for content authors who basically administer portal content. So you can create what's called a site. I already did that for today's demo, and this is the experience you get. So it's a tile-based UI, which you can fully customize as a user. You can add own tiles from a catalog, add other groups, and so forth. I'm not going to do that. And here is our workflow definitions. And as we can see, there is exactly our employee onboarding scenario. Like Eduardo, I also did this a couple of times. And now we'll start a new instance. And this is a way how I can key in some payload to send along when starting the instance. I can pass in simple JSON. And obviously, that's aimed at the developer. In a productive scenario, you would not be using that, but you would have a start UI, which calls the REST APIs, and you would not see this. So for the demo, I'm using this tool, and I am passing some, it can be arbitrarily nested JSON, right? So I'm using an employee structure. I have some user details, so I want to onboard John Thompson, have some job-related information, and let's kick it off. Instance was started. And if we now look, we see onboarding of Joe Thompson, 11:35. That's exactly what we expect. And we should have a task in our inbox for Joe Thompson. There it is. And here on the right, you can see my custom UI that I have developed, right? So you can do arbitrary UI development that you want, and you cannot really discern it from the inbox. So it's really mashed up into one UI. And here in the screen, you can basically select the equipment for the employee. So let's say Joe is not an Apple fanboy, but wants some solid Windows equipment. So let's give him and some Samsung brick. Okay, we kick it off, confirm the task. One task is gone from the list, and if I now look at the instances, the instance has been completed. All right, so this is good. I have a first version, and now I want to extend my model, right? So far, we just have a user task. So typically now, you would probably be purchasing the equipment maybe with Ariba or something. And what you might want to do is type in api.sap.com, which takes you to the API Business Hub. Quickly logging in. And here you can explore APIs that SAP has in its cloud services, and gives you basically everything at your fingertips. I don't know, you could be checking S4HANA Finance, for example, Fixed Assets API, I don't know. So you can browse the documentation, right? This gives you all the details about the parameters, and now that's quite neat. You can also test drive this. So in the sandbox environment, basically. And then you see, what exactly these services look like, how they work, and we might be using that. But for today's demo, I'm actually doing something different. I'll be using a platform service, and I'll be using specifically the gamification service. So the idea is, right, we want to incentivize our employees, to actually do this whole buddying thing. It's extra work for you. So let's say we give you some experience points and badges and stuff like that. And what I'm using is the gamification service. And what I'm now showing you is this gamification workbench. That's the central place where you can design a game, just as an example how you use our services here. And game design means you think about what the experience points are. So I have a type of experience points which are called buddy points, and there is badges that you can get with an image, and there is a rule in the background, which, for example, here, buddy laddering. Whenever an onboarding was completed, as a consequence of that, I want to give buddy points to the person who completed the onboarding, and this is what I want to invoke. So let's make some space here. And let's now say we want to add the buddy points. And now we need to key in, similarly as for the user task, some details. So we're calling a REST service / gamification send event. It's going to be a post method call. We tell what data we want to send along when we do the call and where we want to store the results. And finally, we need to key in the host and the port, right? So where exactly is the service located? And SAP Cloud Platform has the notion of destinations, which is essentially an alias, which allows you to decouple the model from the actual service endpoint, URL, ports, and everything, so that if you transport the model from a dev to a production landscape, you don't need to change the model. That's what's called a destination. And you can look at your destinations here in the connectivity section. And I already prepared this. So here you see host and port and credentials. So I'm using basic authentication with username and password. And now finally, so this URL is not directly pointing at the gamification service yet, because the gamification service expects certain protocol, JSON RPC encoding. We only talk REST in workflow today, so what I'll be using is Cloud Platform integration to basically do a little bit of transformation. And I'm just showing this, prepared this already. So this is what is called an integration flow, which basically tells the ESB how to actually dispatch the message, and it's again following the BPMN notation, so we use the same notation for both workflow and integration, and that's very simple stuff. It's converting from an application JSON body to a URL encoded body, and that's what we're invoking. So that's basically it. And now the last thing I need is to figure out what the payload is that I want to pass on to the buddying call, and I'll be doing this with a script task. So we basically allow you to write inline JavaScript code, which you can then use to basically manipulate the workflow instance's context. So you can read and write, do other computations if you like, and really plain JavaScript, nothing extra. And here I'm preparing the data structure I'm passing to the gamification service. These scripts, these JavaScript files, they're executed in a sandboxed environment, right? So when you imagine that's a multi-tenant environment that we're working in, we want to avoid that you can break out of your tenant and access other companies or other customers' data. So we're doing this in a proper way, and also doing time constraints to limit, the amount of time you can, do computations within these JavaScript files. All that is taken care of. Okay, so let me check how I'm doing in time. Good. All right, so let's go back. We should have a new model, version 43. Okay. Let's try that again. So I'll just confirm this right away. And now to show that actually we have received buddy points, here I wrote a small UI, again integrated into the portal, and here I can see at 11:42 onboarding of Joe Thompson was completed, right? So it's a nice experience you get all integrated into one portal experience. And yeah, that's basically all I have. That's what I want to share. Hope this was useful. And with that, I open to questions. Yeah, that's a good question. So we had a bunch of criteria, and that we chose that before even Flowable was announced, right? So it was a year ago. I think maturity, size of the community, contributions, how many people are using it, stability. So it's really a mature component, and it's also being used in-house at SAP for infrastructure projects as well. So it's really battle-proven, you might say.
It's kind of it's common.
Yeah, I think, and it's very flexible, right? So I mean, it's pretty close to the code, but it's open enough. It's essentially at the core, it's a library, so you can embed it anywhere, and you can put your own concepts on top if it's extensible. And we really like the notion of how we could put in all the multi-tenancy concepts that we had in mind. We wanted it to be at a cheap price point, and so from our end, right, that we can operate it without putting a dedicated VM for every subscription, which would be expensive, and that's what led us to this decision. Yeah. So it's a developer focused version that we have out today, right? So clearly aiming at the developer, more the business or key user type of persona. We have it on the roadmap, but it's a version 1 product, so we figured out that's the core thing we need to do first, and then we'll grow from there. And all these services, like what Eduardo also presented, are developed as independent microservices, which can be subscribed separately, scaled separately, whether it's integration or workflow or rules when they come later this year. So that's.
Does it share the inbox with the other workflow products that you have?
Yeah, that's going to be one of the next things we do. We have plans to basically allow this federation of task streams from multiple systems, cloud applications at SAP, but also on-premise. So there is this notion of a cloud connector, which gives you like a secure tunnel from the SAP Cloud Platform into your on-premise landscape, and then that would also allow you to take tasks from there. Yeah. So that's also coming. Go ahead.
So in a way, and I'm hesitating because I'm not sure.
Please make it a question so I can answer.
No, yeah, I'm just wondering, is this like you said rules part is coming later on in the year?
Mm.
And to me, rules in SAP is about ABAP and lots of sort of complex coding that sort of was there. It feels like you're preparing a replacement for all that hard, heavy lifting that had to go on before, making it a lot more lightweight to use.
Oh, well, if you see, I mean, if you look at the workflow engines and the rules engines, SAP has several of them. We have, for every technology stack, basically, we have an offering. So in ABAP, you have, BRF Plus and business workflow. In Java, you have SAP BPM, SAP Business Rules Management, and now in the cloud, we're reusing some of the stuff for the rules, for example. It's going to be the engine we had already, but for workflow, we chose to go with open source. So it's a complementary offering, and they are not, not
But you made it
competing
in a
with
way
each
that
other.
you can reconsume all that stuff you might have done in those other environments.
Yeah, of course, that's the idea, that this all nicely fits together. So, sure, go ahead.
You said this is now available?
Yeah, you can give me your card and we onboard you.
So is there a licensing model around this?
You got to pay for it. That's clear, and it's user-based pricing.
User-based pricing.
Yeah,
So
and then
users of the application or developers of the application?
users of the application.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, that's relatively standard these days.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. All right. Last question. Say it again. In what sense? No, dedicated schema. Yeah. And then within that schema, if you build an application which is multi-tenant enabled itself, you can have a tenant concept within the schema. So it's really flexible. So if you are, that's what I showed on the diagrams, if you're an independent software vendor, a partner, or actually in-house an SAP team building an app, SaaS application, you can use workflow, and your tenants can become tenants within the database schema again. All right, good. Thanks.